Good night, Barbados. Tonight, just 48 hours into 2020, I've chosen to speak to you from this platform because I believe it is time for us to have a frank conversation about where we are, what we've achieved, where we have fallen short, and quite frankly, what ought to be our mission and our path as a nation. From the run-up to independence late last year to yesterday when we gathered at River Bay to launch the 2020 We Gathering, I've had the opportunity to speak to Barbadians and visitors from all backgrounds, from families reuniting to investors coming to Barbados, from families going about their business. In short, Bajans from all stations of life. Some who have emailed me, some who have stopped me, some who have caused me to have local knowledge as I went to Pot House. They're all saying the same thing. We want Barbados to work. We want Barbados to be a beacon. Friends, our collective mission and our focus in 2020 has to be on building back Barbados. The result we strive for has to be nothing less than the perfecting of brand Barbados and what it is to be a world-class nation. Not sometimes, but all the time. This country, our country, was buffeted for a decade by storms created by us, yes, sometimes, as well as by those from outside. And as we step up the process of rebuilding this year, we are in no doubt that what we build back has to be better, far better, than that to which we have become accustomed. You know it, and I know it. And we hear it from those who come with great expectations, sometimes only to have them shattered. And we feel bad when it happens. So it is important for us to discuss what we mean when we say brand Barbados. What does the Barbados brand mean to you and to those who know us or who do business with us? What does it mean for us to be world class? From listening to all of you, it is clear that it must mean the following things. 1, Barbados must work for all Bajans, all Caribbean people, and all visitors. In other words, for everybody. 2, Barbados must be a place where those of us living here are safe, healthy, educated, comfortable, confident, and happy. And where, my friends, opportunities are available to all, regardless of where you have come from in life. 3, the voice of Barbados regionally and internationally must stand for something good and credible. And where others disagree with us, they must still respect us. In other words, we must continue to be friends of all and satellites of none. 4, Barbados must be able to sustain itself for future generations. In other words, for those grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren who must avoid, for them, we must avoid having our country being strangled by debt or choked by pollution, whether on land or in our seas. My government, my friends, is of the view that the next 7 years of our country's life must be used to build the best Barbados together that we can build, and in so doing, to be regarded as an exemplar for others, to be regarded as one of the best places to live and to raise a family and to do business. And these are not just words that we are choosing. This is what we want the lived reality of our citizens and the people who visit this country to feel and to be able to express. For this, there must be a social compact upon which we are all agreed. The foundation for our manifesto in the last election was a document entitled A Covenant of Hope. It reflected a philosophy of the power of community at its core, a recognition that it is only when people of different classes and at different levels of influence and power respect each other and work together to achieve that which none can achieve on their own alone. These are the things that we know to be inherent in the community that we used to help us overcome all of the bad vestiges of our history. These are the things that led to what is commonly known in our communities as the share pot approach to life, where we help those today who might not have confident in the knowledge that when we don't have tomorrow, they shall too help us. So my friends, at the onset of this, the third decade of the 21st century, I want you to pause and to reflect with me, because this is the essence of our journey. This is the essence of where we must take this country, to formally reinforce what in a real sense was the best of our legacy from those who went before, who understood that resilience and prosperity were born not of an individual mission, but in the cooperative efforts of many. This philosophy will strengthen every aspect of our society and its institutions, of our economy and our ability to grow. Fundamentally, it is about us as a nation fostering trust and urging cooperation. And my friends, we can and we shall, but it requires the active participation of the majority of our citizens. In fact, it is really a redefinition of how we all view our role as citizens. And it will require us being open to change. Change how we eat, change how we work, change how we build, change how we relate to one another. It's not an overnight exercise if we really want to transform this nation and to become world class. And that is why I've set a time frame of 7 years. We might make it before. And if we do, and we work harder and faster, we can. But what we must never believe is that the winning of one race or two races will suffice. We might grow year after year for 2, 3, 4 years. But what is not needed is not that alone. What is needed is transformation for this nation, our country, to become world class. It is not sufficient for us to punch above our weight if we want to be world class. And believe you me, we are happy. We want to punch above our weight again. But that is no longer sufficient for us to secure the next 5 decades for this country. And we need to have a longer horizon if we are going to make sure that it is sustainable. But for us to do it, we must all agree that we can. And I am here tonight to tell you that I believe we can and we shall. The experience we just had in saving the Barbados dollar taught us that the hardest part of the task is agreeing to the mission. Once we agree to the mission, we can achieve it. It is against this background, therefore, today that I first wanted to address you, the people of this nation, to indicate that this is a mission upon which your government wishes to embark. But it requires the cooperation of Barbadians. It requires the participation of the social partnership. It requires the support of civil society. From the very first day of this government, I told you that we would only be successful if we all determined individually and collectively that this was a journey we would have to take together. And we made it clear that we could not expect to reap the benefits of success if we were not all prepared to carry the burden of rebuilding together. But I want to assure you, even as I appeal to you to go on this journey with us, that as we work to become world class, this government, your government, will also focus on the daily things that matter to each of us, because that is part and parcel of the world class equation anyhow. The things that make life easier or harder, the bread and butter issues of ordinary daily living. And I'll come to these shortly. I understand for real how Barbadians are feeling. I get it. And we have cared enough as a government to have started dealing with some of these vexatious issues, even while we were trying to stop the bleeding in the economy, even as we sought to restructure the domestic and the external debt, and to restructure our spending generally. But my friends, 10 years of neglect, no maintenance of key infrastructure and equipment, no new purchase of buses or trucks or equipment for the hospital, no appointments in departments like customs from the controller back down to the bottom of the department, rampant abuse and corruption. Let us be clear. These things have taken and sucked the breath out of this country, and dealing with them is not easy. If people recall, it is just about 19 months that we have been in office. And when persons ask me, how has it been? I tell them simply, it has been intense, because we are fighting battles on all fronts, from the infrastructure to the equipment to the question of our economic performance, to government's ability to pay its bills, to the social systems, to the antisocial behavior. But the difference is that I'm confident that once we ground ourselves with the right fundamentals, we can and we shall make it. So where are we now? For sure, we've stopped the bleeding. The issue of the domestic and foreign debt that threatened to strangle us all, gratefully, are now behind us. We are now on the journey of fostering growth and fueling transformation. And we're optimistic about it. We need to stay the course with our actions over a sustained period. And we will see growth, as I said, year after year after year. But that is not the definition of success for this government. Our definition of success has now to be, as a nation, the transformation of this country over the next 7 years. And this requires of us a few things. One, we must continue on the path that we've already started over the last 19 months of restructuring our government. I mentioned that just now, and many of the services we deliver to the people of this nation to make it easier for everyone to do business. And I'll address that shortly. We must facilitate investments, small and large, from Barbadians and from visitors. And we must invest further in the building of our sense of community and society, preserving the integrity of our social capital, which is critical to maintain our society, but equally acts as the best impetus, as we have seen, to increasing productivity and fueling growth in our economy. So where are we? Sanitation. Every day we've seen people show pictures of garbage on the newspapers. It hurts me just like it hurts you too. But this government has seen to it that we have already purchased and received 9 trucks from one supplier, 10 that came in recently, and there are another 10 that are about to come in the next 2 to 3 months. Those were all paid for. There are 2 definite separate suppliers. Both are in accordance with the procurement rules. The first went to full tender, and that required 9 months for the delivery of those 12 trucks that are now to come. And during the course of October, late October, the Sanitation Services Authority received a request that it could have supplied to them trucks from one of the best known manufacturers for compactor trucks that could come within a month. Under the procurement rules, the government is allowed to do emergency procurement in a crisis. Do I need to ask you whether we had a crisis in garbage collection in this country? I think not. I think the newspapers painted the picture for us every day. And the important thing is that we work with the workers of the Sanitation Service Authority in partnership. And this word partnership is going to come to define every aspect of beautification and sanitation in this country. We are already in partnership with the private waste haulers to help us with bulky waste. We've already recognized that even in the reduction of the amounts that we pay to SBRC, and we have reduced their amount from 24 million a year to 13 million a year, that we will work with them towards a joint venture with respect to renewable energy to help create another stream of income for the Sanitation Services Authority, so that your taxes don't have to carry the SSA's work alone. Equally, we have determined that we will work with civil society to finally work towards the introduction of a comprehensive, educated program for recycling in Barbados. We can no longer believe that the SSA alone can do it. And I've asked the chairman to reach out to the Future Centre Trust and to other institutions to work in tandem with them to ensure that we can turn the corner and that this can be a thing of the past to get behind us. Buses. The last government did not buy a single bus. Not one. And there can be only so many times that you can seek to repair buses. After some time, with the best will in the world, the parts are no longer available. And with all the ingenuity and the craftsmanship that we have, you still will not be able to get that particular part to work. So what have we done? At the same time, we recognize that the last government increased the number of licenses from 500 to 750 of privately owned public service vehicles. And through a more appropriate management of the delivery of those vehicles on certain routes, because they were inundated on one route and not available on other routes, we've tried to start to mitigate some of the situation. Secondly, the chairman and management and board of the Transport Board have been working with existing suppliers known to the country to make sure that we can fix the buses and that we can get more on the road. I'm happy that those numbers are on average just about 80 a day, as opposed to the 40s that they were at more than a year ago. Similarly, the government has already moved to be able to procure appropriately. I think it is about 34 electric buses and the appropriate charging stations that will go with those electric buses. And we started at that amount because we still have to manage our cash flow and our debt levels. For lest I forget to remind you, we are still in an IMF program, and therefore we cannot achieve everything overnight. But in the tradition that is best known to this country, we shall get there one step at a time. Similarly, water. Regrettably, water is an issue that is compounded not just by a breakdown of systems, by the expenditure in wrong areas by the last government in our view, and an underinvestment in infrastructure and maintenance, but it is also a result of the climate crisis. And the bottom line is that there is a groundwater crisis across most of the world as a result of the changes in climate. This government has already worked with Ionics to be able to ensure that water can be delivered down the west coast to Trents to be able to ease the pressure on reservoirs like Carlton, delivering water to other areas in the north. But we recognize and have said to the country already that that in and of itself is insufficient. And to that extent, we are literally making sure that we can take more of the water that we are already paying for from Groves and St. Philip to be able to move and to increase the pumping capacity at the pump station at Vineyard, to build a new reservoir at Stuart Hill, and to be able to ensure that there's additional water sent to Golden Ridge and Bowmanston and from Stuart Hill down the East Coast. These things take time. The procurement of the equipment and the procurement of the various parts that are needed are in the process. And I can assure you that this process will be a major priority for the government as we move forward. Only last week, I signed a further loan agreement with the Latin American Development Bank that is intended to help us also deal with the replacement of mains and the extent to which we have so much non-revenue water. In other words, a fancy phrase for water leaking out the pipes. Because you can't have water leaking out the pipes at the rate at which we are having it and still be able to deliver to people, particularly with a scarcity of water in the groundwater supply. The reality also is that in reaching a deal with one of the main companies, we will also take possession of 2 temporary desal water facilities, one of which will go to Colleton in St. Lucie and the other to Joes River in St. Joseph, which will help buffet the government's attempt to deliver water in the north. And these are all without prejudice to our bringing back to the table the 2 main contractors that the last government awarded major full permanent desal plants to, for us to discuss with them in a more appropriate manner the amount of water we can take matched to the distribution capacity that we have, so that we're not paying for more water than we are receiving when those desal plants are finished. And secondly, that the price at which we will be paying ought to be revisited again. Those things will take place. Those new negotiations with those existing contractors will have to take place so that we can better plan out the affairs of the Barbados Water Authority. Without prejudice to all of that, I've already indicated to the country that the water situation in this country is so tenuous that the Cabinet has taken a decision to establish a water stabilization fund by amending the Constitution of Barbados to include that water stabilization fund such that it cannot be easily removed or ignored by any future government, such that we can have a comprehensive program over the next 20 years, when my hair will be all white, 20 years, in order to be able to ensure that we can replace the mains. Because when the British government put down these mains more than 100 years ago, they had an empire to pay for it. And when we put them down, all we have is a country. But we shall do it little by little by little, over the course of 20 years. And that is why we have agreed that 15% of the renewable energy market should be reserved for the Barbados Water Authority to invest in either individually or through joint ventures in order to be able to replenish, or to not replenish, to capitalize that water stabilization fund which is available to the country. Electricity, well, I don't need to tell you about that. We saw the worst of it, and I hope that the worst is behind us. I'm aware that the temporary capacity that the Barbados Light and Power was renting, the first set has already come into the country, and we're moving on also to make sure that additional capacity comes in by the end of this month, and then the clean energy bridge will be built by July, in addition to the renewable energy which is now proceeding at a far quicker rate because of an appreciation of the different roles between the ministry, the Barbados Light and Power, and the private investors. The other matter, of course, that I'd like to address, because this too is a subject of lack of maintenance for the last decade, is the sixth syndrome in our public buildings and our public schools. From Parliament to the schools, we have the problems. Lack of maintenance, lack of capacity to clean on a regular basis as a result of inability to have the cash flow. And that is why restructuring the debt was so critical, to allow us to do the things to keep the wheels going. So my friends, if we don't do that, and this year already, we fixed more primary schools than has been fixed in decades in this country, and some secondary schools, but it is nowhere near enough to make up for the gap of the last 10 years. But we shall continue to the task, recognizing that as I start estimates next week, we have to determine how we split across all of the different genuine competing demands the limited resources that we have in order to make up the ground that was lost in the last decade. With respect to doing business and paying for services, I, like you, feel that Barbadians should not be standing in any line to carry out their business with government. And my voice has been incessant with respect to the different ministries. It is unacceptable. Waiting weeks for goods to clear in customs is also unacceptable. But we are clear that the deconstruction of the processes in customs and the introduction of the new systems requires everybody to be trained in order to get the maximum efficiency out of the system. And sometimes we rush to judgment or we rush to action without recognizing that we need to read and prepare and train. We want Barbadians to be able to use and pay for services online. And whether it is immigration or whether it is, as we now see at the airport when people come in, we want to be able to do that online. Similarly, we want to be able to use the credit cards that we had, and to be able to ensure that in using those credit cards and debit cards, that people can pay for other services, be it car licenses, be it liquor licenses, whatever it is. But as I said to you in the budget of last year, these things take time, and over the course of the 2 years, we will ensure that we get there. I am told that we are already in a position to receive land taxes and certain other fees online with the launch of Easy Pay a few months ago. Similarly, we had to make sure that we can protect your sensitive personal data, because nobody wants, when their data goes online, for it to be accessible by anybody. So with the best will in the world, my friends, we are rolling out these services, and we will ensure that instead of having to go to 2 or 3 different locations, that you can start to go to a one-stop shop, or you can have a digital permit and payment. In the first half of this year, we want to see the services expand to the police certificates of character. And we expect that you will be in a position to be able to access those certificates of character in good time, instead of having to wait for 6 weeks when you get a job offer to get a certificate of character, only to find that the job then is gone when you go to present the certificate. Similarly, corporate affairs is in the process of deep reform. And the government recognizes that the work we do in the international business sector is critical and depends on the extent to which we can make the work of corporate affairs seamless. And to that extent, we've asked, and I've asked both the Minister of International Business as well as the Attorney General, as well as the Minister responsible for third societies, to deal with matters in a way that will allow us to bring comfort to persons, that they will not be struck off overnight, but at the same time to get them to realize that they must do their business in a different way because we are under different rules. And in fact, the goalposts are moving on us as we speak, with countries in Europe and elsewhere seeking to use blacklisting as a competitive tool to be able to gain advantages over our economy. I will not speak on this tonight, but be assured that we will address this very shortly, because it continues to be one of the worst examples of anti-competitive conduct that small states continue to face in this world. But let me go generally to other areas in the economy. We've gone from a level of debt of 176% 19 months ago of our national income to down to now 114% at the end of 2019. It wasn't easy, and world records will define this as a very uncommon decline in debt to GDP ratios. Indeed, there's a meme going around showing who went up and who went down in the years, and it is instructive to look at it. In 2017, 64 cents of every dollar of taxes that the government raised was spent on repayments and interest on debt. 64 cents out of every dollar. After the restructuring, it has now fallen to 22 cents. Now you understand what I mean about having the space to be able to do the maintenance and to buy the equipment and to do the things that will make your day-to-day life easier as we seek to become world-class in all that we do. But we can't be fiscally fit by restructuring past debts alone. To be sustainable, government must also be run efficiently with leanness and discipline. We have engaged in a massive exercise to bring accounts up to date. And believe you me, in some instances, data was simply not there. We have applied an iron fist to greed and corruptible speed through the new Financial Management Act that Parliament passed in 2019. We have renegotiated oppressive contracts across governments, across many state-owned enterprises. This and other efficiencies have allowed our state-owned enterprises transfers to drop substantially in 2019. And it has enabled us, my friends, all of these things, to turn what was previously a government fiscal deficit that we inherited of 4.2% in 2017 to a primary fiscal surplus of 3.5% in 2019. And we are on our way towards trying to reach 6% at the end of March of this year. We have surpassed all of the fiscal targets, a fact that was recognized not just by the International Monetary Fund, but the rating agencies. But it wasn't easy, and it does require discipline and our ability to be able to plan what we're doing. Falling overall debt levels, fiscal surpluses, and low interest loans from the multilateral agencies which we're now accessing from the from the CDB, from the Inter-American Development Bank. These things have allowed us to be able to ensure that our reserves have risen to a high of $1.478 billion, which is over 16 weeks of import, from the low of just over 400 million when we took over the government. I want to repeat myself that the gross international reserves as of the 31st of December, day before yesterday, was $1,478.5 million from the 440 odd million that we inherited 19 months ago. This is why Standard & Poor's raised our external credit rating by 6 notches last month, halfway back up to our being able to get back to investment grade. And my friends, we can and shall get there. And we will get there as we did under previous Barbados Labour Party governments. Step by step, we may hear cowardly explanations, just as we've heard before. But I pity those who only have such straws to cling to. Every Barbadian recognizes that passing a level on the way down is not the same thing as passing it on the way up. And we will pass many signs that we've seen before. But this time, the question is, are we heading in the right direction with the arrow pointed in that right direction? But we cannot save the dollar and restore fiscal credibility without some costs. If we could, it would always be done and not delayed, and delayed until it was almost too late to save our honor. We know it. What we can do, and will always do, is make the adjustment as fair as possible. And that is the hallmark of this administration. We will make the tough decisions that are necessary, but I promise you we will always make them fairly. We have shifted the frontiers of what is considered normal in other countries through our unique Barbadian values of unity, partnership, and solidarity. To soften the tightening of the fiscal belt, we've prioritized transfers to vulnerable people, such as the non-contributory pensions. When I said watch me, that's what we did. We've cut income taxes for those on lower incomes, and most people will see those cuts kick in again from January of this year. During the last year as well, we put $225 million of cash into people's pockets through paying arrears of income tax refunds, corporation taxes and VAT refunds, reverse tax credits. And as if that were not enough, we also put $77.8 million in cash for CLICO payments and over $200 million in bonds, $300 million in bonds for CLICO. We enter this new year with optimism that the seeds we have sowed will bear fruit, with a number of projects having gone through the regulatory process, and many are at a very advanced stage and are ready to go forward this year. And I am by no means speaking to all of the projects, as you will hear a number of them that I have not included, including the one that is on the front page of the paper, which, like you, I am reading for the first time. These include, my friends, the Royalton project at Discovery Bay that will see 230 rooms, and they are due to start construction once we complete the regulatory processes by May of this year. It also includes the construction of a new hotel on the Caribbean site, Indigo, and they too are in the final stages of their regulatory process, and that is for 171 rooms. As is the case of Port Ferdinand, which will be expanding with hotel rooms now, 74 additional rooms to the condominiums that they have. The Sandals Royal expansion will be adding a further 66 rooms, and this is at the Sandals in Christchurch. The Hyatt is in the last stages of their public communication and town hall meetings, and that is intended for just under 400 rooms and 40 suites. Chafet will be building a new ice cream manufacturing plant and a meat packaging plant in Lears, and I'm due to do the groundbreaking for that within a matter of weeks. The paving of Grantley Adams International Airport, where $49 million is being spent to repave our runways, which is absolutely critical for our airport. The construction of 100 new stalls, vending stalls, at the Fairchild Street Market, because the conditions under which we have made our vendors live for the last 2 decades there are nothing short of woeful, and it is this government's intention to be able not only to make them better, but to make that location an area where all Barbadians and visitors will want to congregate, rather than us having to see them operate in the way in which they have for the last few decades. The Temple Yard improvements also have started with the installation of water and electricity, and we are now working with them to improve the entrance and the other conditions of there. And then, of course, there is the establishment of the Golden Square Freedom Park, which will see the demolition of the National Insurance Building as well as the old fire station building. This Golden Square Freedom Park must forever stand as a monument to our freedom and independence as a modern democracy. I ask Barbadians all over, where is Golden Square? 95% of them do not know. It is not a badge of honor. This country cannot have the 1937 riots coming out of Golden Square, a national hero in the form of the Right Excellent Clement Payne having a bus in Golden Square, and 95% of Barbadians do not even know where it is. As a result of government stated policy, the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. requested quotations under Rule 232 from 7 companies and received responses from 1. It turned out that that response from Vision Development Inc. also involved a number of other local companies: C.O. Williams Construction, Shelbury Construction, Crane and Equipment, Rental Equipment, LT Trucking, Verking Trucking, Tipper Trucking, Brock Incorporated out of Wisconsin, and Interstate Sawing and Demolition, who specialize in deconstruction and selective demolition. Now, why is she talking all them things? Why? Because the NIS building and the fire station are going to be demolished using a combination of robotic equipment, labor cranes, and excavators. The first 3 levels will be done with robotic equipment and cranes, and then the lower levels with excavators with trucks carting away materials to the dumps. We are taking the time to work with all of the vendors in the surrounding areas and users to limit the disruption. But my friends, in the projects I just announced, I didn't tell you about the Pierhead project for which there's an application already for outline permission. I didn't tell you about the one for Carlisle House for which there's likely also to be an application for construction there. I didn't tell you about the Treasury building. But I tell you that in doing these things, we are going to have disruption in Bridgetown, my friends, for the next few years. Because the only way the buildings can be built is by us literally doing what has to be done to take down and to build back. The one thing you can be assured of is that this government cares and that this government will listen to you. And this government has insisted that the BTII engage with persons who will be a liaison to work with the vendors, to work with persons, to make sure that even during the periods of dislocation or discomfort, we can mitigate the losses. But we can't move forward without inconvenience. It is like trying to make an omelette without breaking an egg. Virtually impossible. So, despite all of this though, we have embarked on a program to speak to the country and to let you know at every stage. But among us, there are still some people who are embarked on a campaign of propaganda laced with comments about building a society or comments glibly put across WhatsApp and social media. I understand that there are some who from opposition have to use their voices to remain relevant, even if the facts do not support their contention or even if they are hasty in their judgments. I get it. But we must never seek to do so by creating a false separation in the premises and to lull Barbadians into a belief that you can separate literally an economy from a society. It's like trying to tell me, my friends, that the body can survive by only having a heart that pumps blood, but not depending on the other organs of the body. And if the economy is the heart that is pumping the blood, can you survive without the organs? Like the kidney, like the lungs, those other organs that are necessary for life. Similarly, a nation depends on both economy and society. And I must confess that I actually take it as a compliment that on matters pertaining to the economy, the government has been performing far above what was expected. Hence, people are no longer taking that on. But even at this stage, after all the pain people have caused us, then I'm telling you that for them to remain unwilling to concede that many of the social challenges we are grappling with today are as a direct result of their failure to maintain an economy that was healthy and robust enough to cause us not to have to pay out 64 cents in every dollar to debt, then we will have to ask them whether they have completely divorced themselves from reality. So, transformation is what we're about. And we do so recognizing fully that the two go hand in hand, economy and society, and that the many broken aspects of our society will never be adequately repaired and built on if the necessary fiscal infrastructure is not developed simultaneously. For us in this new Barbadian family, transformation and growth are twins that will be nurtured therefore together. And only then will we be able to achieve the better brand Barbados that we see. But we don't live in this world on our own, and we can't achieve our goals if we fail to recognize the connection between what we do, how we are viewed and treated to by the rest of the world, and quite frankly, how we treat ourselves to world issues. And we'll come to that. But in order for us to get to that point, I want us to recognize that we have some challenges that we have to face. We have a problem in this country with chronic non-communicable diseases. I've spoken about it over and over. And I need Barbadians to take control of their own health and wellness as we go forward. But even as I ask you to do that, we've asked the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to establish a massive community outreach program by the engagement of community nurses, at least 30 community nurses, who will be given responsibility, each of them, for a large number of individual patients that they will visit in their homes and communities to make sure that they're managing their processes well. Similarly, part and parcel of that outreach exercise has to be to put personal trainers in communities to get particularly our elderly and our indigent moving, because without exercise, we're not going to win the battle. Similarly, we are looking at being able to allow access to food, fresh fruit and vegetables at a cheaper price, particularly for those suffering from chronic NCDs, diabetes in particular. Similarly, we have asked in education that we recognize that the time has come for a major reform of how we do business. You have heard us speak over and over about the fact that the government is now committed to the removal of the common entrance exam, which seeks to relegate people to stations of life or to opportunities or no opportunities depending on where they go after the common entrance. 10 or 11 years old is too young to ask a child to determine what their life should look like for the rest of their life. And I'm glad that the Minister of Education is fully recovered and ready now in 2020 to lead that discussion with the Barbadian people, because in so doing, we will have to determine whether we literally expand primary education, we create middle schools, and we also create schools of excellence such that every single secondary school that will take children, if we do the middle schools from third form on, is a school of excellence. And we do this conscious that as she deals with formal education, the country must also deal with non-formal education, hence the National Training Initiative that we have launched in conjunction with the Social Partnership, so that we can get Barbadians to understand that every Bajan must know what excellence looks like, what excellence feels like, what excellence tastes like. And whether it is a car washer or a permanent secretary, whether it is a waiter or a minister, whether it is a nurse, whether it is a lawyer, from whatever station, a bank teller, that we must all know what constitutes excellence, train to it, and then monitor the habit of excellence over the next 7 years, because that is how we shall become world class. And as to the other underlying issues that are causing us difficulty within the social area of social capital, we will work towards making sure that we can provide affordable housing for Barbadians through the National Housing Corporation, but also through the private sector. And why have we been able to stop and move at this pace now? The government put out a tender for new designs of housing, recognizing that the houses we were building, regrettably, my friends, many of them will not withstand Category 2 or 3 hurricanes in this country, because we got accustomed to building a style of house without reference to the fact that we still are vulnerable to hurricanes, even if not regularly. That process with the tenders opening will allow us now to be able to settle on new designs, particularly for low-income housing. Those who can afford it will hire the architects and the engineers. I'm talking about those at the very bottom of our society, for whom, therefore, affordable, accessible housing is critical. And now that we have these designs, when the analysis is completed, we can then start to embark on the aggressive housing program that I've promised for our people. Similarly, we have 650 families that have been identified by the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elderly Affairs as the most vulnerable families in this country. Yesterday at River Bay, I reminded the country that it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a nation to save a family. It is against this background that today, the 2nd of January, I appeal to Barbadians who have in them the spirit of charity and the spirit to be able to want to give back, knowing that this country has been good to many of us. These 650 families will be the focus of this government's program within the respect of building of social capital, But we recognize that government alone will not be sufficient to help stabilize them, and that we need other people who will give not just money, but time and guidance and nurture them to be able to move persons from the bowels of poverty and vulnerability to one where they can give back to this country ultimately. I will ask the Ministry of People Empowerment to run the ads on the Government Information Service for those Barbadian families that want to volunteer to help government in the effort of being able to raise these 650 families from vulnerability to independence to interdependence. This is our nation. These are our families. But as I speak about this behavior, I also want to remind us, my friends, I'm old enough to tell you now that behavior doesn't fall out of the sky. If we don't nip behavior in the bud, it blossoms. And we have to begin to understand that how we have done business, particularly in the last decade or two, is not appropriate for us to do it going forward. We need to start talking with each other and not talking to each other. When we see children doing something wrong, we need to talk with them and their families, not just simply talk about them. When people see somebody walking with them with a gun that is not licensed, they need to understand that they're putting themselves in ignorance and nonsense. And we need to make sure that we can tell people who are hiding guns in our houses, not about here. It's not fair. Because then we wonder why people are then holding their belly when people are charged and go to court. And if we don't do something about it from early, we're not going to be able to change it. I said at the beginning of this term that there are only two things that give me anxiety. One is a hurricane, and the other is automatic weapons. There is nothing courageous about having guns. There is nothing that gives you a badge of honor about having a gun. We recognize that young people are attracted to things that appear to be glitzy. And for those who are playing Fortnite and these other video games who have become desensitized to killing, we recognize that this is an issue. And that is why we must have the conversations with our children and our young people. That is why I'm going from school to school. I'm not asking anybody to do that which I'm not prepared to do. And we must also get to the point where, and I've told the Attorney General this, that whistleblower legislation must not only be about financial crime and corruption. We have to be prepared to confront the warning signs within our communities, within our families, that may cause those who we have raised to become either victims of crime or residents of Dodds. It is up to us to make the difference. We will also have to start to say that the early warning signs are the things that we have to nip in the bud. And you can expect to hear from our community leaders, our sports personalities, our school children, our members of parliament, people among our society with the ability to influence, to start to spread the message that there's a time and a place for everything. You will hear us talk about how we ought to behave as hosts, how we should treat people. I see some memes going about with people cursing people who come into the establishment or onto a bus. It is not appropriate. People cursing people on the beach. It is not appropriate. People behaving at funerals in a way that I suspect that they hear about libations and wanting to be respectful, but not knowing about it sufficiently, do it in a crass and vulgar way that would cause people to want to literally attack them. No, I don't want to attack them. I want to talk with them, because I know that deep down when we talk with each other, that we can make the point. There is a time and a place for everything. And what we do in a dance hall, we can't do at a funeral. How we dress to go to a dance, we can't dress to go to a funeral. How we do things in the workplace is different from how we can do it on the playing field. There is a time and a place for everything. How we speak to our friends is not how we speak to our grandmother or parents or other elders. And we need to get back and remind each other about these values that are critical to building the nation we desire, by always being true to the recognition that there is a time and place for everything. So my friends, I felt the need to speak to the people of this country tonight. I really did. I've been carrying a lot of this in my bosom, recognizing that the heaviest load in the transformation of our fiscal environment, the crafting of a new way of delivering services in Barbados, has to be carried by government. But believe you me, no set of new laws and no adoption of international charters or conventions will make us treat each other any differently. And those who visit with us must understand that we will treat each other as well as them with respect and with dignity. And this will only come from an inner determination and a commitment to personal change from all of us. I want, as we go forward, for you to recognize that this is going to be a busy year for us. In this year, we are going to be hosting a number of people. We start with our families. We start with our families from within Barbados coming back to parishes and from outside of Barbados coming to the country. We will also literally be hosting a number of major conferences this year. The UNCTAD conference makes us, UNCTAD 15, Barbados will become the smallest country ever in the world to host the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development from the 19th to the 23rd of October. And before that, there will be a series of fora, of civil society fora and different fora for young people, for creatives, for commodities that will allow people from different backgrounds to participate in discussion before we get to the ministerial component of it. Similarly, it finishes the day before the United Nations turns 75 years formally. And we will therefore have the nations of the world with us on that occasion as the United Nations celebrates its 75th anniversary. For the first 6 months of this year, I also have the responsibility as Prime Minister of Barbados to be the chair of CARICOM. And that surely will add additional responsibilities to us, but we are equal to the task. And one of those things that we shall do in hosting the conference in February here, that we will be able to try to make tangible progress on key things that matter to Caribbean people. And at the same time, work to establish the first ever summit of the Africa Union and CARICOM in June of this year on our way to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. There will also be meetings, pre-meetings before the Inter-American Development Bank Board and a number of other ministerial meetings. In sum, what am I really saying? That in a very real sense, the international world believes that Barbados is on its way back. It is up to us now to make that belief real and credible, because a brand is only as good as it is real and credible. And we know what it is to have examples of excellence among us. We know what it is to have persons like Sir Garfield Sobers, regarded as the greatest of all time, or Rihanna, who has now shown that she is capable of building an empire from music to fashion that is second to none globally and is commanding the respect of all others, not just because of the money-earning capacity, but also of the ethics and the inclusiveness that she has brought to the business which she leads going forward. Can we now ensure that more Barbadians are known globally? That is why we have chosen the very simple tag, Global Citizens, Barbadian Roots. Because that's really what we're trying to do at the end of the day. And I've tried always to keep the message simple. We want by 2030 to be a fossil fuel free nation and to be at best and carbon neutral at worst. We want by 2030 to make sure that all young Barbadians under the age of 18 are bilingual, can speak a different language so they can go out and get by, can swim, are exposed to a sport, are exposed to a cultural discipline, and ultimately know the rudiments of entrepreneurship. These simple things allow us to be able to make sure that they will take care of us. But the government also has a duty to lead you and to point the direction as to what can make us world class, what can make us stand above the rest. And that's why even in the project of more than 1,166,000, the planting of more than 1 million trees and plants in this next year is something that we say can't defy us, that we can make it. Those who say it can't be done, we say it can. And that we should never believe that fiscal difficulty should cause us to commit environmental suicide as a climate, and as a country, and as a global environment. Why? Because we know that the planting of trees helps with what we have to do to reverse the climate crisis. It is the reason why, even with difficult fiscal situations, we have made sure that we can open the Winston Scott Polyclinic 24 hours as an alternative source of emergency medical care, or that we followed the science with putting medicinal cannabis on the national drug formulary, recognizing that for people who suffer from epilepsy or different other neuro conditions, Parkinson's, etc., that this makes a real difference to the quality of their life. We will tell you, my friends, that it is all capable of us achieving it. But in becoming global citizens, we have to make sure that what we offer recommends itself for further people to want to buy, to share, or to come and see. And that means that it matters not simply what the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. advertises, but it matters how we treat those who visit here. It matters not simply what Invest Barbados says is the experience of investing in Barbados, but what is the actual day-to-day reality of what people will experience. I know that if we do this together, I'm telling you that we can and we shall become world class by 2027. But it requires our commitment, and it requires understanding the difference between mediocrity and excellence, between cigar-filled sobers and those who also tried, Rihanna and those who also tried. We have great examples. And I ask you, the people of this nation, to join me on this journey, to join our government on this journey, to ensure that Barbados will not simply just be known for punching above its weight, but the Barbados we know, the Barbados we love, the Barbados we are building together, brand Barbados, will be the best Barbados we can do. And if we are prepared to roll up our sleeves and do the heavy lifting together, I know we can make it. We might make it before 2027, but I'm being fair. 2027 must be that moment in time when we say we tackled not just the economic or the social, but the total picture. And we are saying to our children, we are laying a platform for you that will allow you to live in the best Barbados possible. And that will say to the rest of the world that this Barbados is truly world class and truly can be trusted for delivering what it promises to deliver. Let's do it together. Thank you.